The Matt and Dale Podcast, Episode 4.
We've just been discussing, looking at our social media analytics to find out how this podcast's progressed, right, Matt? And then we're I think initially a little shocked. We weren't perhaps traveling as well as we thought in terms of numbers who'd viewed the post. And then so we're going, oh, we're feeling a bit I don't know about you, Matt, but I was feeling a little bit despondent. And
Yeah.
and then we had a look at some small posts that we've been doing through the Thrive group, which I think is about 2,000 followers or something like that, or
Yeah.
friends, or however you want to view it on Meta these days, Facebook. Um, and then we were relieved because I think one of the snippets that you'd posted, I don't know, was it about 120, 150 views or something?
Yeah, so it was Wise Words Wednesday with Dale. And
And then we're like, oh, that's great.
yeah,
We
yeah,
got 120 views. And then
yeah.
that came back to our original post. It's not our content. Our content's good, right? But
Yeah.
it's more, yeah, it's like it can't be that. Like it's just about marketing.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think our message was, well, and then we sort of went into a little bit of, oh, I don't like to over promote myself, and maybe you should really rethink what we're doing here. But then we
Mm,
obviously want to get a message across, and I think that's where we really came to, and that we were coming out with some really good content, based on just being
mm.
authentic and hopefully capturing some sort of key areas that, people, who are viewing this podcast want to work on.
Yeah.
Um, but we also then came down, well, what was the topic for today? And then I think really from that is, seeking approval from others really came up well, didn't it? Because
I
what
think
we're
so.
doing, and I think,
Mm,
people on social media, right, from kids through to adults, looking for approval, through how many likes, followers, or whatever you want to view it as in terms of getting approval
mm.
to continue doing what you're doing. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it that society almost in this world is based on that and
Yeah.
on external circumstances to make us feel good, really, or make us feel worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think for me, like it comes down to once again, uh, survival and belonging.
Yeah,
So I think there's a part of us that still has that feeling. Well, if we get likes, if we have like 200 views, I think yours got up to nearly 200. We're like, woo! And so I think there's this feeling of, well, people like that. That means that we're accepted, and if we're accepted, it means that we belong to something. And belonging means, well, we're not going to be out in the cold and fending for our life because we're going to be supported. So I feel like there's still a part of us that biologically really craves that belonging and that acceptance. That's what's coming through for me when that comes up. But I know. What are your thoughts, Dale, on that one? That's
yeah,
obviously
I
very
really like that. I tend to, I guess in my head, seeking external approval is a bad, what would come up for me. That's not a great thing to do because,
mm,
so I get bad that comes up
yeah,
when I see that, and look, it can have really well, even dire consequences, can't it? When we
yeah,
live in that world trying to get approval through likes on social media or whatever, whatever it is. Uh, However, when you look at a bigger picture view of it, that we're all just ultimately seeking connection and community,
mm,
um, it makes sense why we go down into that direction. And
mm,
is it truly bad to, want to connect with other people and grow your friend base and look at it from that perspective?
good point.
So it's interesting. I saw a Mark Zuckerberg, um, I think it was in the US, and he was effectively getting grilled by the Republican senators. Not that I'm getting political on this podcast, but how, how much damage he'd done to the population, through
Mm,
social. And I can't quite remember it, but they asked him to apologize. And
mm.
um, But I'm sure there's some good stuff that's come out of it too. And again, this isn't to be political, Republicans or Democrats over there at
Mm.
all. It's just something that came up for me and hearing your comment, is social media all bad? Like,
Well, it depends. What are we using social media for? Is it to get things, or is it to give things? And I feel like when I used to post things, uh, even up until a few years ago, I would post something in order to get something in return, whether
mm,
that was likes or validation. But now, if I'm going to post something, I ask myself the question: am I trying to get here, or am I wanting to give? And if it's needing to get something, then I completely I just don't post it because I'm doing it for the wrong reasons.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, so I think for me personally, the big shift for me has been changing from getting to
yeah, I like that.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's like I think that can apply, that applies into social media as well, but also outside of that, right? In society building relationships generally.
mm,
Am I going in with what am I going to get out of this, or what can I give into, what can I give? And I remember
yeah,
someone talked to me in when I was in a consulting role, um, probably in some training, or it could have been an old boss or something like that.
mm,
So, but very much when you're going into, particularly when I was in a sales role, it's right, rather than sort of going in with the intention of like what you just said, what am I going to get out of this? It's
mm,
more a case of how can I give? Like, how can I give in this situation? And
I love it.
you will feel a whole lot better and you'll probably get a whole lot more out of it when you come in with that attitude, right?
Yeah,
Or in terms of, behaving in that way, in that giving sense. Because people, right, at the end of the day, they want to feel good, as part of your interaction with them. And if you're trying to get
mm,
something, you really got your own self and your own, do you know what I mean? Self in mind rather than, hey, I'm here for this person. I want to give to them. What could they,
mm,
it makes there's a big shift in that. And I think in terms of building relationships, the latter is much more effective wherever you are and whoever you're with.
yeah, yeah. No, that's right. It helps life in general. Yeah, it's really interesting, but I don't think I used to have even that awareness. Like I would just go from, oh, that's a cool picture, I'm going to post it. But now it's like, oh, that's a cool picture. I really love that. What do I like about it? And if I get that feeling like, oh, I want to share this, that's when I have the chance. I'm like, well, what is the reason why I'm sharing this? Like, can I just enjoy this photo with my loved ones and do a file into a personal file? And I know for me personally, that's been really humbling, and it's been a beautiful thing to sort of uh, almost have private in a way. But back when I was younger, I just used to share everything.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I don't know if it's like an age-related chapter in my life, or if it's uh, the awareness that I've grown. I'm not too sure. It could even be a bit of both.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I can relate certainly to, both sides of the spectrum and probably over, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, well, 4 years maybe, I haven't been as active on social media, particularly my private life. I'm
Mm,
barely on those forums, but obviously I was interested in this one because it's more, well, I mean, it's professionally related, and I really, we wanted to have a professional output,
mm,
impact
mm,
with some of the things and themes we come across in our own daily lives, but also what we're seeing in the rooms with the people we're working with.
mm,
So, um, but yeah, I probably noticed myself kind of pulling back into that private life and kind of honoring that private life a lot more.
mm,
Maybe it is a bit of an age thing.
mm,
I think being more content in my own life now, I still need people, don't get me wrong, but I probably don't need as many as I used to. I've
mm.
noticed that contracting in a good way, and maybe there's a little bit
Yeah.
more um, kind of trying to answer your question from what I think. Maybe more, well, more comfort in who I am and the fact that I perhaps don't need lots and lots of people to make me feel
Mm,
good. And generally I don't. If I have lots and
mm,
lots of too many people.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
just more content in my own self, in my own skin, I guess. I don't know if you can relate to that.
yeah. I can definitely relate to that. And if we're going back to the getting and giving,
Yep.
what I've really changed now, when I get that feeling of like, oh, I want to get this from other people, I just stop and I go, oh, I wonder if I can give that to myself, and what would that take right
Yeah. So so rather than giving that, so can you just repeat that, like what you meant there?
Well, if I do get that feeling, like if I'm seeking external validation, or uh,
Mm,
I'm seeking to be seen, or if I keep unpacking it, really what it comes down to is I want to get love, and then it's like, well, maybe I'm sort of lacking that right now. How can I give that to myself? So it might even be going to the swim center and going to the spa and sauna, or going for a gym session, or simply just being kind and compassionate to myself, because in that moment maybe I'm not giving that to myself and I'm searching for it from other people, which we know can be pretty unreliable. I just feel like if I can rely on myself to give it to me, then yeah, it's probably, I know, like it takes a lot of work. It takes a bit of time to work out what that looks like.
mm.
But I just feel like it is a lot more reliable.
It's a what,
It's
sorry?
it's a lot more reliable than seeking it from other people.
Well, it's a lot more rewarding, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I just think because,
Mm,
if you're able to do that or generate that for yourself, you're just less reliant on external things or external people, codependent, really, on, let's say, other
mm,
people to make you feel whole, good about yourself. So there's an interesting switch there, isn't there? Because
mm.
then when the person out in the street, I mean, don't get me wrong, and I'm probably like you, Matt. I mean, I do still take things personally, but
Oh yeah.
if someone said something about you offhand, and just a smart comment, and not saying I wouldn't take that personally, but
Mm,
I wouldn't be as affected by that comment that I would have used to have been, you know.
yeah.
Um, and I really put it down to what we just talked about, you know, being not looking for external validation, because I was like I wouldn't say the worst, but I always worried about what other people thought of me. Like it was
Yeah.
because I didn't have a self-belief. I didn't have self-esteem. I'm
Yeah.
talking, quite a few years ago now.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, sorry, going a little deeper as we do, it's because I didn't really understand who I really was.
Exactly.
So here I'm looking at kind of trying to build who I am. And maybe that is what people do sometimes in social media. They're trying to build almost their identity. The trouble is
Uh,
they're letting go of all their power by, the
mm,
like here, or, oh, I got a good comment, or um, no comments. Oh my gosh, mortified. A bit like us earlier when we got our analytics back. Um,
yeah. Yeah.
so, hey, we're not perfect either.
Far from it.
But so I think there's something in that when you have a stronger foundation of who you are, you perhaps have less need to go out there for validation. And you're
Mm,
less concerned about what other people think about you or say about you. Again, not perfect, and we're still human, we do care,
mm.
but it allows you to stay true to your own course and maybe even progress through life without getting pushed and pulled so much, and more in that kind of staying true to your vision is coming
Uh,
up to me. And
yeah.
gosh, I can think of countless examples of, people in life who've been able to let's say, achieved great success or fulfill their visions and their missions and done great things.
Mm.
And they're the people that have probably had to put up with a lot of ridicule, abuse even, but they've just stayed true on the course somehow
Yeah.
to just seeing through all that and getting through all that and not being as affected by all of that, something like that, to maintain that true
Yeah.
course.
And how does someone get from that, Dale, getting from this place of not really knowing who they are and seeking possibly validation from others? How do they get to that point of finding out who they are? Like, do they need to fly over to India and attend like a retreat or something, or can they do it, uh, in their own sort of safe place and at their own time? How does it how does it happen?
Oh, there could be like a myriad of answers to that one. I mean, it really depends on the individual, doesn't it? I mean, you've had your
Yeah.
journey, you've gone through it to a degree, I've gone through it to a degree, and my journey will be different to yours. But I think there'd be most of the time there'd be some commonality with
Mm,
what we've experienced, and I think one would be, and this is where we're coming more into the perhaps the therapeutic space in terms of how we would work with well, certainly speaking for myself, how I might work with someone. Um, And the degree of which you would go into this with a client would really be dependent on, obviously the,
mm,
the person you're working with and where they're at and what their goals were, etc. But
mm.
I believe we're taking people from um, let's say an egoic sense of who they are, um,
Mm.
which I generally, what not even generally, I see as an untruthful view of self,
Yeah.
um, because those views are created from a conditioned mind, which is, either in the past, well, it's been from the past, right? Which isn't currently the way it is. And it's generally skewed between a more of a fearful lens of who they are in the world and um,
Mm.
often not based in a lot of reality.
Okay.
This means something about me, and that's why I've had that experience and then
Yeah.
that's compounded into another experience and another one that they've seen as meaning something that perhaps
Mm.
didn't even really exist. Um, and I think it's unpacking all of that and seeing the faultiness of, and I think we actually had a short the other day, seeing the faultiness of the thinking. And it's that
Ah,
thinking that's created the construct of who they are, which is generally an untruthful interpretation of who they are. And I think once you spot that, you're then able to move outside of that.
that's right.
And that thing outside of that is who you are. Now that's a further exploration of, well, who is that? You know, and
Yeah.
that takes time and application. You're going to go in a myriad of
Yeah.
different ways of discovering that, and it's down
Yeah.
to personal preference and all sorts of things. But I mean, that's a highly generalized way of viewing it. I know, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's the case for everyone would look at it that way. Nor is that the way that I always go into a clinical engagement at all. But
Mm.
that's been my experience of understanding who I'm not. And I talked about, I think, on the first episode, who I'm not
Mm.
and understanding who I'm not first. And it's through the understanding of who I'm not that I start to discover who I am.
That's right. It was that German counselor that
Ah, the
you
German
had.
counselor, yeah.
90% of your thoughts are
99.
not, oh,
I
oh,
think it was
that's
99.
even,
I might
oh
be
no.
misquoting it, but 99% of your thinking is bullshit.
Oh, that's
Something
right.
like
So,
that.
so what's
Stinking
that one?
thinking.
Now I'm going to be ruminating on what that 1% is.
Um, Oh, that's true. I don't know if there was a 1%. I don't know if he had quite his like that was
Yeah,
like um you know s- psychological there's
yeah,
evidence associated with that, but there
yeah.
was certainly a truth in it.
Mm.
And thinking of that, the way that we used to unpack it, this is going back to rehab days. Um, he used to start the sessions in group therapy saying, what do you was it like what what are you thinking and how does it make you feel? So he'd go around each of the group members and you'd have to state it. And you're like, oh, geez, I don't want to give an answer that I'm anxious. Otherwise, I'm going to get grilled by everyone in the group and group therapy. So
Oh,
people are going, oh, you're feeling pretty good, but I could never hide it.
no.
And so I just get like picked out, like lack of poker face completely.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Too authentic, though.
I was trying to work out honesty back then. That
Yeah.
was another journey as well. So, but yeah, I think that says a lot because, what we think is how we feel, right? So,
Mm,
but I guess the point being is that it was challenging the thinking, right? Which is sort
mm,
of CBT related, like, oh, sorry, cognitive behavioral therapy related.
mhm.
So, what I think isn't necessarily true, particularly if it's coming from a negative interpretation of an event. Is it true? Is that what he used to say? And
Mm.
then behaving differently to what the thinking was telling you to do, the faulty thinking. And it was those two ways that you were um, really questioning the thinking. And then the thinking really was all about lots and lots of thinking, which has created this very
Yeah.
dysfunctional view of self.
Mm.
And then it was by doing that, you could see, well, hang on, I can change my behavior. So how I behave isn't actually who I am.
It's great, isn't it?
That's a
Yeah.
that's a big shift. And then so then that's right. And then it's like who I thought I was, if all my thinking isn't true and all those faulty thoughts, that completely shifts my dysfunctional view of who I thought I was right throughout my life. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, and then yeah, and away you go on the journey, and then it's
Yeah.
lots of in and out and still happens.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that's how you get there. But that's how I got there anyway.
I love that too. Just doing activities to show people that their thoughts are actually really untrue. Like there's a activity I do with clients in here where I get them to walk around the room, but while they're doing it, really thinking that they're unable to walk around the room and they're just
Yeah,
walking around the room. So I say, all right, say it and think it and really believe that you cannot walk around the room. It's like, all right. And they're actually walking around the room while they're doing it
I love that. Yeah.
just to show them that. Oh. And another one is like when they might come in and say, "Oh my God, I'm having all these intrusive thoughts, and every thought that comes up, I think it's going to happen." And so I go, "All right, I want you to imagine you're going to have $1 million sitting on your lap in 1 minute." And we wait. Did it happen? Oh, so you thought that, but it didn't actually come to fruition. So what makes you think that these thoughts just simple things like that. But it's really hard to realize because these thoughts can become so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And of course, that if you want to call it the ego or that part of us, uh, yeah, it does feel really believable, and we can get. But if we do simple activities like that, it's quite easy to see that, well, your German counselor is pretty correct in that way, his theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very similar themes to what you were talking about, like challenging the thinking. And I guess, when you think about like your original question, well, how do you get there?
Mm,
Um, and something that we do take clients through, obviously, in our therapies, not every client, depending on, exactly what their needs are, but it was through the embodiment of cognitive behavioral therapy, really, with some other
mm,
things as well, um, that you can put that therapy, like we've just been talking about, questioning the thinking, and
mm.
challenging the behaviors, and you workshop that day, moment by moment, day by day into your life. And then that changes the construct, I think, of of
Mm,
of that dysfunctional self. It's not the only, I mean, I do believe there's some other additives, but we could other talk about, but
mm,
to that. But I think that's a way you can do it for sure. Um, because I think the sessions in that we do with our clients, they're good, but they're only as good really as someone then, is able to um utilize the tools of therapy in their own lives and workshop them
Mm,
into their own lives. And I think that's where you
mm,
really get the big gains and the change. Um,
mm. Exactly.
and always encourage people to do it, but some do, others don't.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like the counseling space is where you learn the skills, but outside in the real world is where you put them into practice.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like, like it's the training in the rooms.
Mm,
Perhaps you could, put it in that basket, and then when you get out
mm,
into the world, you're on the court, right?
mm.
Um, you're training and then you're on the court. You're putting it into your own life. And then you maybe come back and talk about it with your counselor, psychologist, or what have you.
Mm.
How did you go out there? Well, this happened, this went well, this didn't. Let's talk about it. And
I love that.
um, yeah,
That's really great.
I mean, it doesn't always work out that
Yeah.
way, but with a few clients, they can, most part. So
Yeah. And I think also normalizing what the brain's doing here and or what the
yeah,
ego's doing, like it's programmed in order to protect and ensure that we survive. So I think also what I try to do with clients is make them feel like, well, it is actually completely normal that the brain's doing this because the brains that have thought like this are more likely to look at the negative, and then we're more likely to actually survive because we'll be looking out for all the possible dangers, you know. So I think coming from a place of normalizing what the brain's trying to do here, but then coming from a higher place and going, well, we don't have to do this anymore, brain. You know, I really appreciate you looking after me here, but we can do something else now. We've learnt new ways.
and if you can say that to your brain, which you can, right, on reflection, is that part of you, that brain, that primitive brain, really you? Because, I could say I have exactly the same thing going on in my primitive brain as you do,
Mm,
as does the next person, as the next person, as the next person, next person. Yet we've got this ability to step outside of that,
mm,
witness it. So is that really truly us? Maybe it's part of us, but is it really our identity? Maybe someone could argue it is part of your identity, but I think a lot of people utilize that primitive part of the brain or that,
yeah,
you know, safety first, fight, flight.
mm,
Um, there's a danger out there all the time. And then they start to see that as their identity,
mm,
which is kind of tragic, really, because I think that's where a lot of the pain comes from. And then that can be hard to dismantle,
mm.
not dismantle, but unpack because it's very fused in some people. Um,
It is, and yeah, we can start to really believe everything that the brain's telling us.
yeah, and yeah. So look, I mean, it's a huge topic, and I'm, you know,
Mm,
it's something I continue just to work on, like for myself, and obviously, when I've got, working with clients, and you know, clearly we don't have this conversation with all clients because there are certain times you utilize it, but I guess
mm.
it's in your, you know, how you've recovered as much as you can be there and in a person-centered way for someone else. It's still you're still bringing that into session. But I think that's a great way also what we just talked about, whereas we've developed some of those skills with the CBT application and what you were just talking about,
Mm,
then we become less judgmental as a result of that understanding and
mhm.
experiential understanding, right? Because we don't judge the behavior as being us, and therefore, if someone is exhibiting,
Yeah.
let's say, behavior to it's being judged in most, we don't come in with that judgmental approach. So
No, that's right. I look at the brain as like a scared little puppy dog sometimes, or
yeah,
even a guard dog. I don't know if the listeners can if this resonates, but if you're walking down the street and you go past a house and there might be a raging dog come out because the dog
yeah,
doesn't actually know who you are. It just sees everything as like a danger. So I feel like the brain's very similar to this. It lots of things as like, oh, it's a threat, I better bark.
Yeah.
So it can be a little puppy dog that gets distracted, but it can also be this like big scary dog behind a fence, and it just doesn't know who this person is. So I like to get like really like animal metaphors because for me it's something that I can really relate to. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know if that relates to the viewers as well. If you want to comment, uh, and
Well, everyone could just, as I said, as part of their workshopping this experience, they could observe their dogs and start to see the similarities, how their own egos work.
exactly, not much difference.
So I don't mean
Yeah,
to be too dismissal of, because I know people do really struggle, with this stuff, and I certainly was one of those people and still do, from time. I
definitely.
think it's always a wrestle for me. Like
Mm,
it still comes back, and it's a bit of a wrestle at times, and then it'll
mm,
leave, and I
yeah,
feel the freedom again, and it comes back and it goes, and
yeah, yeah. It's hard. It's hard work wrestling with a dog.
yeah,
Sometimes easier just to give it a smack at.
yeah. There's some interesting stuff in all of this, and it's just such a big subject, with so many
Mm,
applications, and people will have their different views on what we talked about, and this will resonate with some, maybe not for others, and that's cool too. Um,
mm,
yeah, it's an interesting one, and we have to, as counselors, um, and therapists, we always need to sort of see things from other people's perspective, and I
mm.
continue to work on that. I'm not perfect at it, and um, but yeah, seeing it from someone else's perspective.
Very nice, Dale. Well, I'm just looking at the time.
Yeah,
We might have to finish up.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, like I said before, if anyone would like to comment or throw in any topic they'd like us to cover over the coming weeks, feel free to comment below. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
we'll
think
take
we're
it from
always
there.
interested in new topics as well. And, we want to
Mm,
understand if this is resonating with you, or, you'd want some further exploration around a particular topic. Because, we really want to, I guess where we're really going with this, Matt, is using our own personal development and experience, but also our professional experience and what we
mm,
see, and how we've seen, how we've seen others' journeys, and how we've helped other people, and some of the pitfalls we've had. And
mhm,
just to really explore a lot of different themes, from relationships, identity, depression, anxiety, anything, and how we can help you guys and people out there,
mm.
um, benefit and
Yeah.
progress and become more free and peaceful, and whatever it is you want, or purposeful.
Mm.
So, thanks very much, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Dale, once again.
No worries.
See you next time.
Okay, mate.
If you or someone that you know needs immediate support, please see on the screen a list of hotlines you can call. And to book in with a clinician at Thrive, you can phone the reception or book online. And remember, you're never alone.